If you've ever looked out of an airplane window and believed that everything up there, among the clouds and the cold, is perfectly under control, this story will make you think again. Imagine a massive airliner flying smoothly above the Pacific Ocean. No storms, no major mechanical failures. And yet, it would slowly slip into one of aviation's most baffling emergencies. This is the story of Nippon Airlink Flight 207, a journey that began as a routine flight from Tokyo to New York and ended as a lesson that changed how the world manages the skies. It's a story of language, humanity, and the fragile line between order and disaster. It was a clear, cold winter morning in Tokyo, at Narita International Airport. Flight 207 of Nippon Airlink was preparing for departure. Its destination, John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. A 12-hour, 10,000-kilometer journey across the vast Pacific, carrying 150 passengers and 9 crew members. At the controls sat Captain Takumi Hayato, a veteran pilot with over 17,000 flight hours. Beside him, First Officer Kenji Morita, young, ambitious, and new to the Boeing 707. Behind them, Flight Engineer Shun Arai, responsible for monitoring every single system on board. Their aircraft, a Boeing 707, was one of the early legends of the jet age. It had flown for over 15 years, but it was still considered reliable. Yet, during the pre-flight inspection, the maintenance team discovered a problem. The altitude hold autopilot was unstable, so it was disabled before takeoff. This meant the pilots would have to control the plane's altitude manually for the entire 12-hour flight. Unusual, but not impossible. At 3:00 p.m. Tokyo time, the silver jet accelerated down runway 34R and lifted into the winter sky. The engines roared. The city fell away, and calm sunlight flooded the cabin. Everything seemed perfect. Passengers relaxed with meals and movies. The crew, confident and focused, settled in for the long trans-Pacific flight. For the next 11 hours, nothing went wrong. Then, as Flight 207 entered U.S. airspace, they made contact with Miami Center and later with New York Control. And that's when the trouble began. A massive snowstorm was sweeping across the U.S. East Coast. Visibility dropped. Winds strengthened. 3 major airports, JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark, all reducing landings by half. The sky above New York was congested with waiting aircraft, each one circling in holding patterns, burning precious fuel with every turn. Flight 207 was ordered to hold over Virginia, then later over New Jersey. Every new loop, every transfer from one controller to another, cost hundreds of kilograms of fuel. But with alternate airports also getting hit by the storm, their options were shrinking fast. Inside the cockpit, flight engineer Shun Arai watched the fuel gauges dip lower and lower. He quietly told the captain, "We're burning faster than expected." Captain Hayato just nodded. He remained calm, controlled. He'd seen turbulence, storms, even lightning before, but this time the threat was silent. As they reached the MRN holding point, dozens of planes were already stacked above and below them. The New York controllers were completely overwhelmed, juggling voices, altitudes, and call signs. When First Officer Morita radioed in, his words were polite but crucial. New York Center. Nippon Airlink 207, fuel low, request priority landing. But in the standardized language of aviation English, fuel low is only an advisory, it's not a declaration of emergency. The controller acknowledged the message and simply asked them to continue holding. 8 minutes passed. The fuel warning lights blinked amber, reserves dropped below the safety margins. Then, finally, came the message they'd been waiting for. They were cleared to approach JFK, but the weather hadn't improved. They faced strong crosswinds and heavy snow. The runway lights were just faint glows through the haze. Without the autopilot, Captain Hayato took full manual control. Gear down, flaps set. Maintain glide path, he said, his voice steady. But then the wind suddenly shifted. The plane drifted below the glide slope. First Officer Morita warned, "We're low on the path," Hayato corrected, adding thrust to the engines. The engine strained and then the crosswind hit again. The huge bowing jolted violently. The altitude alarm screamed. "Go around," Hayato commanded. He aborted the landing and pulled the plane up into the night. It was absolutely the right decision, but a costly one. As the plane climbed, engine number 4 failed. Fuel pressure dropped to 0. They were running out. Morita called air traffic control again, his voice tense now. "New York Center. We are low on fuel. Request immediate landing." But again, it wasn't the right phrase. He didn't say fuel emergency, and so they were told to wait. The cockpit lights flickered. Electrical power started to fade. They were only 10 kilometers from the airport. Then, one by one, the engines began to die, until silence. Total silence. Outside, the dark outline of Long Island stretched below. City lights shimmered in the distance, so close, yet unreachable. Captain Hayato took a deep breath. He still had control. Even without power, a Boeing 707 could glide. If he could just hold the right pitch, it might just reach open ground. The crew expertly guided the aircraft through the snowy night, and minutes later, the impossible happened. The plane touched down on an empty, snow-covered field. It was a violent impact, but there was no fire. The fuselage cracked, but the cabin stayed intact. Within minutes, the emergency slides deployed. Passengers stumbled out into the freezing air, dazed but alive. Rescue teams arrived soon after, their lights flashing through the storm. Every single soul on board survived. In the hours that followed, investigators from the NTSB and Japanese authorities arrived on the scene. The black boxes were recovered. And what they found stunned everyone. There had been no major mechanical failure. Every system had worked exactly as designed. The cause was human. Fuel exhaustion made worse by a complete breakdown in communication. In the cockpit recordings, investigators heard First Officer Morita say fuel low several times, but he never once said the critical words fuel emergency. In international aviation, that single phrase triggers immediate priority. Without it, controllers assumed the flight was still safe to continue holding. The NTSB concluded, "This was not just pilot error, but a chain reaction, a perfect storm of language gaps, communication habits, and cultural differences in cockpit authority." The younger, respectful First Officer Morita hesitated to forcefully declare an emergency. He deferred to his senior captain, and the critical moment passed. After the incident, Nippon Airlink completely overhauled its training. Pilots were retrained to use ICAO standard English in every situation, without ambiguity, and new fuel monitoring systems were installed, allowing ground control to track consumption in real time. This phenomenon, known as the authority gradient, became a major focus in aviation safety. In response, the industry embraced what's called Crew Resource Management, or CRM. It's a training philosophy that teaches crews that every member, regardless of rank, has the duty to speak up when safety is at risk. That principle, born from tragedies like Flight 207, has since saved countless lives. And what about Captain Hayato's final glide? From a physics standpoint, it remains legendary. Using only aerodynamic lift, he guided a powerless Jetta 60-ton aircraft safely to the Earth. With a glide ratio of about 15-1, he turned a falling machine into a soaring glider. Today, decades later, the story of Nippon Airlink 207 still echoes in aviation schools. They call it the miracle in the snow, a near disaster that became a lesson for generations. It reminds us that even in a world ruled by automation and checklists, human judgment is the final safeguard, and sometimes one word, one heartbeat of hesitation can change the fate of an entire journey across half the world. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories from the world of aviation. Fly safe and see you next time.